Hello fellow collectors, thanks for clicking on the video. I'd like to take just a few minutes today to talk about how I personally collect my movies, or certainly the vast majority of them, and that's by blind buying. For anyone that doesn't know, that just means buying movies that I haven't seen before. And if you've watched any of my haul videos, you can probably guess that's my preferred style of collecting. Now, there are many different ways of film collecting, and I'm sure that most of us have been through phases of lots of them. At times, you want to collect films that reflect your personality, to make sure that you have your absolute favourites, and a collection that represents you and reflects your taste. Perhaps you're more interested in format at the moment, and these days you're fully on the 4K bandwagon and only collecting movies that will look the absolute best that they ever have. Or maybe you find yourself currently invested in a particular company, and you are busy building up to own their full catalogue of releases. And of course there are many other ways as well, and each style has their merits. But personally, over my collecting journey, I found myself gravitating more and more towards purchasing titles that I know very little about. Now this has come about partially because I've reached a stage where I mostly have the films that I've seen and that I want to own. Favourites such as franchises like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, for example. In part also it has come through my further interest in boutique distributors. That developing interest has led to my collection looking very different to how it used to, not just in size but in style, and I would probably say that about 2/3 of it now are boutique Blu-rays. This has been a steady change that has taken place for me, but has definitely led to my current state of blind buying, proportionally probably over 90% of what I purchase. So to get to the meat of it, why do I blind buy? To boil the answer down as much as possible, I'd say it's because what I enjoy most is the process of discovery, and the chance of discovering something great where you had no expectations or preconceptions. I find that immensely rewarding, and it's how I've decided to engage in film collecting of late. And my collection as a whole has become a fairly eclectic mix, reflecting much more than just my personal tastes. So while there have been films I haven't liked, and plenty of films that I thought were just average, every now and then I come across something that blows me away and rockets itself into my list of favourites. One such film was Girlfriends, a film from 1978 directed by Claudia Weil. There was a small Criterion sale on last year with specific regards to films directed by women. The only title I was interested in was Certain Women, directed by Kelly Reichardt, and I hadn't heard of any of the others. But I needed to for the deal, so I read the blurbs and I decided to pick up Girlfriends. As it turned out, Certain Women didn't really pique my interest that much. For me it was a just above average pickup, though one that I was glad to watch and one with good performances. However, Girlfriends was stunning, an absolute joy of a film. It's a sort of young adult coming of age story, finding out who you are as an adult. It's a young woman navigating her 20s in late 1970s New York. It was touching and engaging, funny and sad, the characters had depth and were interesting, and it was just overall a wonderful film that I adored. A highly recommended watch from me. And that is just one example, but there are so many of them, such as Repo Man, My Man Godfrey, Decalogue, and Gosford Park, La Haine, and more recently, Devil in a Blue Dress and The Cranes Are Flying, to name just a few. Discovering these incredible gems is something that I find so richly rewarding, and is a direct result of blind buying. Now, to clarify further, by blind buying I don't mean picking up a title with absolutely zero knowledge about it, though I have done that based on people's recommendations in the past, and will no doubt continue to from time to time. For me, usually when I make a purchase, I'll read the blurb, and I often check critic scores, just to make sure that others have found quality in the film as well, and usually that's enough information for me to make the purchase. Now, I recently came across a post on Reddit that was talking about our collecting habits and whether people blind bought or not. And of course, one of the drawbacks is because you often have no idea what to expect. What if you really dislike a film? You've spent your hard-earned money and you've got nothing much to show for it, which is a very valid criticism. Now, back when there was a wave of collecting culling videos, or a stream of thought in our boutique hobby space regarding the idea of removing things we won't watch again or don't enjoy, I watched a video by a YouTuber called Aaron Pin, where he talked about his views on the subject, and they made me reassess my own, and I found myself strongly agreeing with him. To paraphrase, he talked about how tastes change over time, and even if you get a film that you don't like now, you might revisit it in years to come and find that your thoughts and views have changed dramatically. And if you remove things you don't currently like, you might lose the opportunity to revisit them in the future. That is, of course, if you have the space to keep them. Well, that attitude is definitely fundamental to my current collecting habits. For me personally, I'm okay with making purchases and then finding that I don't really like a film. The example I'll give is the Criterion edition of Being There, which features Peter Sellers. I honestly couldn't even make it through this one, which is very rare for me. I did not enjoy it and I couldn't find anything much to like about it. I just found it boring. That being said, I know some people love this film. There is undoubtedly quality here, but whether it was the mood I was in, my stage of life perhaps, or some other such ineffable quality, I was just not able to connect with it when I watched it. But I do look forward to revisiting it further down the road, and I fully intend to keep it in my collection. During the first lockdown back in 2020, I found myself revisiting many films and some that I hadn't seen in years, and I really enjoyed that journey. There were a few that I had even done a complete 180 on, for better and sometimes for worse. And I found that so interesting to see how my thoughts had changed, and sometimes so drastically. And so the biggest drawback of blind buying might actually turn out to be an interesting journey to take in years to come, and you might find yourself sending some appreciation back to yourself from years past for picking up a certain film that at the time you didn't really care for, but finding that it's now one that you really love. That being said, not everyone shares those thoughts, and so others who enjoy this style of collecting might choose to sell on films that they didn't enjoy rather than keep them, which of course is perfectly reasonable. Not only is a way to make money back from those purchases, but additionally so if space is a concern for you. As a quick aside regarding streaming, being in the UK I don't have access to the Criterion channel, but we do have the BFI channel, Mubi and iPlayer, which is surprisingly rich in golden and silver age Hollywood movies for anyone interested. And it is something that I definitely make use of sporadically when I invest in a month here and there. I certainly don't advocate wasting money, actively buying films that you dislike or even think that you'll dislike, as streaming is a great alternative with little financial risk, though of course the catalogue available changes, sometimes rapidly, and it is usually significantly reduced from what we can buy physically. I'm extremely lucky to be in a position where I'm happy spending money on physical releases and taking on that risk of currently not enjoying them. But that certainly hasn't always been the case, and might not be the case for many of us, and so streaming presents a solid alternative choice where we can delve into areas of film that we have no knowledge of, and still enjoy that aspect of discovery. But if you are in a position to be purchasing your movies, and you are considering blind buying, or increasing the number of titles you blind buy, I would encourage you to do so. Film discovery is such a wonderful journey, and you never know when you'll come across a new favourite. It might be when you least expect it. And then being able to enjoy the physical copy of the film, perhaps with a booklet, art cards, or other wonderful extras, can really make it all the more satisfying and further adds to the enjoyment of that film. And of course, makes it very easy to revisit when the mood takes you in the future. Anyway, that wraps up my thoughts, and I really hope that you found them interesting and got to know my style a bit better. I'd love to hear about how you collect your films, whether you blind buy or if it's something that you steer clear of. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.